Is ready and here.
So, welcome everybody. This is our first Zoom meeting for the Anti-Turkish Society. It's been a long break. Our last meeting, real meeting, was back in March, and it feels like a lifetime away. We've had to go for Zoom because there's a pandemic, and the pandemic is just not going away. If anything, it's getting worse. So this will be the pattern for perhaps the next 6 months, perhaps the next year, maybe even further. We might even have it as a parallel event, so we could maybe have Zoom meetings and also some real meetings when we come out of the pandemic, because this has the advantage of bringing people, both speakers and participants, from overseas as well. So there are advantages. Doğukan, do you want to go for the screen again, the big screen? There we go.
Yes, I just typed it wrong. Organize it.
There we go. That's better.
Yes, I do that too.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Craig. So good evening, everybody. And thank you, Craig, for setting it up so nicely. You probably will need to mute yourselves. My name is David Shank, and I'm the chair of the society, and would like to say how nice it is that Doğukan will kindly give the first of our virtual seminars. Of course, we'll have many more if they go well, and I'm sure that they will. Now, we found from experience that very long introductions don't work very well in virtual seminars. So really, all we need to say is that Doğukan did his master's in St. Andrews, and he's now doing his PhD at SOAS. And we're very, very pleased to welcome him to talk about the legends of Hagia Sophia. What we'll do is allow him to speak as usual, and then we'll go into the normal kind of seminar discussion at the end. And that, of course, will also give people an opportunity to make any comments they would like to about the format that we're using. I should explain that one can run these seminars as webinars, which means that interaction is a bit more difficult, but the whole presentation is a bit more formalized. So in future, we can carry on with this informal method, or we can go to a more formal method, depending on how we feel this one has worked out. But we'll try with this one first. So thank you very much, Craig, then, for setting up the technology. And now we turn the floor over to Doğukan. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody who is here tonight, this evening. And I am also thankful to Anglo-Turkish Society for organizing this event. There's a great opportunity, as you have mentioned, especially in these hard days. And today we will talk about the legends of Hagia Sophia. I am sure many of you have visited Turkey, Istanbul, and Hagia Sophia was one of the first places you have visited. It is indeed remarkable, it is inspiring, and we are all mesmerized by its architectural structure, its enormous beauty. However, Hagia Sophia bears a meaning much more than that. It also has a emotional value, which was inherited during centuries. Hagia Sophia is an old building, over 1500 years. And so I would like to talk about the legends, what they mean, what they meant for Ottomans, how they inherited Byzantine legends into their literature work. However, before coming to that, I'd like to give a short briefing about the condition of the city in the 15th century before the conquest in 1453. It was not that glorious city at that moment, actually. There is a Spanish ambassador, Clavijo, who visited the city around 1402 or 1405. And he states that the gates of Hagia Sophia were falling apart. The city was in so poor condition. So probably he had something else, something more glorious, gorgeous in his mind. However, because of the wars, because of the economic situation, and the Byzantine Roman Empire was actually just what you see on the right side of the slides. It was quite a small place. So empire was pretty much its name left. And even Mehmed II, after the conquest, according to his court historian, Tursun Bey, he climbed up to the dome of Hagia Sophia, which is not an easy job. But if one Ottoman Sultan did that, I would say that was Mehmed II. So it's not really surprising from him. And he looked at around his city, and he recited these lines from Saadi, an Iranian poem. The spider waves the curtain in the palace of Caesars. The owl calls the watch in the Afrasiab's tower. So he is actually sorry. He's sad about the poor condition of the city. And one of his projects, of course, was to return the city into life. So he followed some policies to repopulate the city. And by doing that, he also made some enemies, which we will come at the end of this talk. And so now let's a bit talk about Mehmed II's politics, his political ideology. He surely wanted to be regarded as the Roman emperor, Roman successor, and therefore, like in his view, as sun, there is only one sun in the sky, there should be one empire over the world. And to reach that point, he used history in a very wise way. We are talking about an intellectual person here. So after the conquest, one of the first things he did was gathering historians, Byzantine historians, and priests who were holding, of course, some valuable books. And he asked them to give information about the history of the city and history of the buildings, especially about Hagia Sophia. And later, he started a translation project. So those Byzantine legends were translated into Persian and Turkish. They were translated into Persian because it was still literature language in the court, and they were translated into Turkish for propagandic goals, of course, so people could read, people could talk about them, so people could get ideas about what they are having, what they are holding, what they are living in now after 1453. And I would like to divide the legends into two groups. On the one hand, we have the authored ones, which were patronized by Mehmed II himself, and the others are anonymous legends. We don't know who wrote them. And let's see what they tell us about Mehmed II's policy and how Hagia Sophia sits on the middle of the 15th century Ottoman politics. So here there are some legends, as I have mentioned, by Ahmet Bijan and Şemsettin Karamani, a translation. And there are some historic dealing chronicles. Ibn Kemal is later, actually. He is not from Mehmed II's time, just after him. And what do these legends tell us? They are linking this Orthodox Christian structure, Orthodox Christian church, with Islamic tradition. How do they make it? For instance, Ahmet Bijan, in his chronicle, he repeats the word masjid, which means in Arabic, place to pray. However, we use it, of course, for mosques. But rather than saying the emperor built a kilise, which means church, he repeatedly, insistingly uses the word masjid, and he says padishah rather than calling him king or emperor. Padishah is the king in Turkish, so another name for sultans, another title for sultans. So by doing that, talking about Hagia Sophia in that manner, in Islamic, Turkish Islamic terminology, he connects it with Ottoman tradition. Another matter is added by Ottoman authors, which did not have place in Byzantine ones, is the Prophet Solomon, who is mentioned in Quran as well as the ruler over the world. The gods gave him superhuman power, so he could rule over whole humanity, human beings, animals, and even nature. So even winds, even ants, even rivers would obey his orders. And Ahmed Bijan relates this Quranic narrative again with Roman emperors who built Hagia Sophia, because Romans were ruling over the world, like it was given by God to Prophet Solomon, as King Solomon as well. So here another link with Hagia Sophia into with Quranic narrative. Another one, which again doesn't exist in Byzantine chronicles, but exists in Russian Orthodox travelers who visited Hagia Sophia around 12th or 13th centuries. And they mentioned that the gates of Hagia Sophia were actually made of Prophet Noah's Ark. And these authored legends uses this information because this is more valuable for them, because Prophet Noah is also mentioned in Quran. And another link with Islam, another tie with Islam for this Christian church. Because what we see here is that, okay, the city is conquered. I want to mention this. It didn't surround. If it surrounded, the scenario would be different probably, but cities conquered are allowed by Islamic tradition to be sacked and plundered up to 3 days. Actually, Mehmed didn't want that. He wanted to protect the city. However, because the city did not surrender, he had to allow his army to plunder and sack the city, but except Hagia Sophia. He kept Hagia Sophia for himself, not to be sacked by his army. But this is called kılıç hakkı, right of sword. So he could just take Hagia Sophia away. But rather than doing that, just saying, I pay with blood for it, it is mine. Just rather than saying that, they try to make connections, so legitimize their ownership over Hagia Sophia by making Islamic ties. Another matter is, as you can see, do you see my mouse movement?
Yeah.
Okay, so you see, as Hagia Sophia built as a church, it doesn't face towards Kaaba in Mecca. However, mosques are facing towards Kaaba, as this mihrab is doing. And Ahmed Bijan, interestingly, uses this difference, this angle difference, in an Islamic way. He states that it was built in that way, not facing towards Mecca, but it's facing towards Jerusalem, which is the first Qibla of Muslims. So he says that's why it is different. And it's a fact. The first Qibla was Jerusalem rather than Mecca. So he again brings an explanation why it is in that way. So at this point, I will mention about the history of the building a bit, because it will be helpful for us to understand those legends. So here on the right, you see the second temple, second Hagia Sophia. which was built by Theodosius, because the first one was burned after a religious clash, religious rebellion in Byzantine Empire. And interestingly, Ottoman Chronicles uses here the Byzantine rulers, Roman emperors, as defenders of monotheism. So rather than calling them as infidels, they actually defend their sides. I mean, in fact, the rebellion was between two Christian groups, actually, but it is more valuable for Ottoman authors to regard them as fire worshippers, because they were also infidels against the Orthodox Christians. So, you know, they push the other one away and they keep Orthodox Christians in their sides by actually defending their action. So Ottoman Chronicles actually praise Theodosius as building the second temple to pray, for praying to God. However, that one was also set in fire during a political revolt. It started in Hippodrome, and then the rebels set fire Hagia Sophia, as you see here. And after that, Justinian built the third Hagia Sophia. However, its dome collapsed, and after some time, like 10 years later, another dome was built, as you can see here. I made this up. You wouldn't see that anywhere, because it would be confusing if I put like second Hagia Sophia, third Hagia Sophia, and fourth Hagia Sophia. No, this is still the third Hagia Sophia, but let's say the first edition of the third. So this is the dome. And now we will come to the dome, which is another, which creates another link between Islamic tradition and Hagia Sophia. According to the Ottoman legends, they take the fact that the dome crumbled after an earthquake and collapsed, which happened indeed. But Ahmed Bijan relates it with Prophet Muhammad. According to his narrative, the emperor was desperate, was helpless, because he and his architect couldn't rebuild it. So he sends an emissary, an ambassador to Prophet Muhammad for asking for help. And Prophet Muhammad gives a handful of soil to use in the lime, so they would, you know, rebuild the dome. And Prophet Muhammad's companions ask, why did you help them? I mean, you know, they are not from our religion. And his answer is that, according to the narratives, I helped them because one day my people, my ummah, will also pray there. So here again, another link made between Hagia Sophia and Islam. So if you now consider all this together, it's actually a lot to say. And imagine people are talking and they are discussing about these things at that time. So, you know, this is going all around. One more thing is probably the dream, which is very important in Ottoman history. According to the Ottoman chronicles and legends, when the emperor was building, Justinian was rebuilding the Hagia Sophia, his architect disappears, and they are like, or in another one, they don't know how to finish the building, so they are in desperate position. And in emperor's dream, an angel comes and shows the emperor a plan showing the plan of Hagia Sophia. And next day, the emperor calls architects and tells him about what he saw. And the architect says, I know, I had the same dream. This is not something we know from the Byzantine sources, but Ottomans added this. And actually, it quite makes sense because the same story, same dream is also still today, you can hear that from people, for Süleymaniye Mosque. According to the narrative, Süleyman had that same dream, and Mimar Sinan, the great architect, also had the same dream for building Süleymaniye. So, and in Ottoman history, apparently, dreams were very important. I mean, the foundation of the empire goes back to a dream, actually. Osman, the founder of the dynasty, has a dream, and he sees in his dream a tree branch going all around the world, spreading all around, representing his empire. As we mentioned, this one now with Hagia Sophia, and then Süleymaniye, and later another important dream from Ottoman history is doubtlessly Evliya Çelebi's dream. He falls in sleep and he has a dream, and then he starts his great journeys. So up to this point, we have talked about the authored, patroned legends and how they support Mehmed II's political agenda, actually. You know, they are talking about a universal empire by mentioning Prophet Solomon's kingship. They legitimize and they link Hagia Sophia with Islamic tradition. These all suit with Mehmed II's Muslim Roman Empire ideology. And now let's move on. The anonymous legends, what do they talk about? Unlike the authored ones, in anonymous legends, architect is praised rather than the emperor. As they mention, emperor would be powerless. He would be nothing if he didn't have the architect, because rather than Justinian or Theodosius, and in that case, they don't mention name of Mehmed II, they say the king, emperor, etc., but it is referring to Mehmed. They mention it's not the emperor, not the ruler who builds Hagia Sophia, it's the architect. So the one who is holy, who has God-given skills, is not the emperor, but the architect. There are different architects. It's a bit confusing, actually. They use different names. I mean, we know who are the architects of Hagia Sophia, Anthemius and Isidore from Aydın province. However, they bring up another name, Ignatius or Ephrata, can be seen. But unnamed architect does not exist in Byzantine chronicles, but it exists. It comes from a disappearance of the architect. It comes from probably Shahnameh, which is Iranian literature work. So rather than being influenced by Byzantine narratives, the Ottoman author, who we don't know who he was actually, he used that disappearance of architects from Shahnameh, because when the architect disappears, what could the emperor do? Therefore, we see here now Hagia Sophia sits on some political discussions in the second half of the 15th century, which we see an anti-imperial narrative, so anti-Mehmed narrative, because Mehmed, the disappearance of the architect is important because Mehmed executed his architect. Apparently, he asked his architect Sinan, his name was also Sinan, this is a coincidence, to succeed Hagia Sophia. Because according to the legends again, when Justinian built Hagia Sophia, he said, "A Solomon, I have exceeded you. I have exceeded your temple. Mine is better than yours, bigger than yours." And Mehmed had to do that. But his architect, Sinan, failed that because Fatih mosques, today you have seen, you can see, is actually an 18th century building. And it is the only Salatin mosque, which was built, only Sultanic mosque, collapsed after an earthquake. The others survived, but only the Mehmed's one collapsed. And this gives us a clue for that. It was not built well because Mehmed forced, apparently, his architect to exceed Hagia Sophia. And because he couldn't manage it, he was executed. So this anonymous legend, which was written after Mehmed II's death, is using this story, this event, in a way, as a way of criticizing Mehmed and his imperial policy. They see him, he could be violent to achieve his goal. Because the legend, for instance, say that execution of the architect was a sinful act, and trying to exceed what God has given Hagia Sophia is another sin. And there is a point saying that, is it possible to hope to seek for good merit after praying in that mosque? So it is quite harsh and quite sad, actually. But then we should ask, who could be that author who wrote it? Who were the enemies of Mehmed II? Here I have put the plan of Fatih Mosque, Ospedale Maggiore in Milan, which was built by Renaissance architect Antonio Filarete, and you see Green Mosque in Bursa. So two of them are Ottoman, one is Italian, and Mehmed's mosque complex has similarity with Ospedale Maggiore in Milan. We do not know for sure if the plan comes from that, but it wouldn't also surprise us again, because we know Mehmed followed some Renaissance architects for reshaping his city, like Yedikule, for instance. It has this star-shaped building, which was quite famous in Renaissance Italy. And here, by locating his mosque, okay, let me go and tell you the previous one. So this 14th century Ottoman mosque complex, actually it's also a complex, had prayer locations, as you can see anywhere, but also these rooms were the places where classes were given. So ulema, the clergy, but I will continue calling them ulema, they were giving classes in the mosque built by Sultan at the same place. What Mehmed's bring after the conquest, when he opens a new age in Ottoman history, he pushes the madrasas, so the ulema, the clergy, away from the mosque. Mosque is only for prayers, and the mosque bears the Sultan's name. And where is the Sultan's tomb? It's here on the center again. And the ulema are pushed away, as you can see, like in the plan of this. This was actually a hospital church on the center. And these are the parts of the hospital. So we know that Mehmed also made enemies, probably by executing his innocent architect. and as I have just mentioned, ulema, not only by pushing them out of politics, but also by confiscating their income, because to rebuild his city and for the wars, for new conquest, he needed money. So he confiscated ulema incomes of religious lords. He forced some Turks from central Anatolia, from Karaman, to move to Constantinople to repopulate the city. And he also forced some Jews from Thessaloniki to move to his capital so they could, you know, populate the city as well, and, you know, give some life for the trade, which was pretty much dead. So Mehmed actually made some enemies, and we don't know who was the author of these two versions of anonymous legends, but it seems like he was a literate guy, so he could write such things, such story. But it is a mystery, of course. So we can conclude that Mehmed was not really also favored in his time by some groups, even though he was a great conqueror and great intellectual. His relation was like that also with Italians, with Venetians. I mean, he was fighting with them, but he was also patronizing them in terms of art. So, you know, after an agreement, for an agreement, as an agreement after wars with Venetians, he asked a painter to come to his capital and to paint himself. So he had this artistic side, but he could be also harsh to reach his goals. And yes, this is all I would like to say, and we can have questions. And I can elaborate more details actually, because not to take your time a lot, I didn't really I didn't want to get lost in the details.
Well, thank you very much, Doğukan. Now, what we're going to do is try and run this discussion session informally. So as we're quite a small group, I think that would just mean that we discuss things together, and there is no particular priority about the way that people speak, although of course we should all try and speak, as it were, in series rather than parallel. So this does mean, Craig, if you could kindly unmute everybody. I see everybody's on mute at the moment. So if you unmute everybody, please.
Okay, ask to unmute. Right.
Yeah, so and we hope we don't get too much feedback. Otherwise, we'll just have to get people to unmute when they're speaking. Well, perhaps I can just start. Could you talk a little bit more about the extent to which Christian imagery went through to the Ottoman period or not? So how did they deal with that very specific aspect of the architecture?
Could you please repeat? Christian?
How do they deal with the Christian imagery that they were faced with when they turned it into a mosque? What was their reaction to that?
Okay. We know that until the mid-18th century, the mosaics were not covered. So during Mehmed II's time, the depictions, mosaics were open as it is, as you can see right now, and they were praying under them. And actually, like Tursun Bey, who is the court historian, and also Kemal as well, they praise those works. They say they are remarkable. I mean, Virgin Mary is depicted there, Jesus is depicted there. They tell about them, and they also they are mesmerized by the marbles as well. In the mid-18th century, they covered apparently for some security reasons, because some travelers were grabbing some parts of mosaic, and some like the officials in the mosque were selling illegally. So to protect that, this is also what I listened from Semavi Ege, who was expert on Byzantine heritage. And so protect that, they decide to cover them in the 18th century.
Yeah, thank you. That's very interesting. If you stop sharing your slide, then we will be able to see everybody.
Like this?
There we are. There we are. That's great. That's great. That's great. Good. Now it's almost as if we're in the same room together. Not quite as good. Not quite as good. But there we are. So who would like to ask a question? You can either just speak out, or if you rather use the method of raising your hand, Craig can see your hand raised if you press on the raised hand button, and he'll know who you are.
I'd love to, Craig.
Okay, Jeremy, please.
Doğukan, thank you very much. My name's Jeremy. I found that very interesting and I appreciate it. I'm going to ask you a question a little bit like David did, which may take you slightly off your subject. But I've always been interested in the Church of the Apostles, which stood on the site where the Fatih Jami was built. And I've always been struck by the fact that it didn't seem to have any chance. It just got knocked down to make space for the mosque, which suggests that it wasn't at all impressive, or not impressive enough for it to have been saved from destruction and turned into a mosque. Do we know anything about the Apostles? I mean, it was presumably the second church of the city, so it must have been impressive, and yet clearly not impressive enough to get knocked down to make space for the new Fatih Jami.
Thank you, Jeremy, for the question. Nice to meet you as well. And thank you. This is a very interesting question. I have also thought about it. So actually the patriarchy was there, and Mehmed actually didn't touch them, but later on the patriarch wants to move to Balat, where they are located today, and the Church of Apostles is damaged apparently. So it is not simply destroyed. And yes, we can see how impressive, we can get some ideas if we visit Venice and San Marco, because clearly it was inspired by Church of Apostles in Venice.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Are there any images of it at all, depictions of that church? Because I've not heard of it before.
Could you please repeat?
The church that was knocked down. Are there any depictions of it or pictures anywhere that would you know? Or is there any images of it anywhere?
No, I think there are some drawings.
Yeah.
Previous travelers, but nothing comes to my mind at the moment.
Interesting. I hadn't heard of it before.
Yes, and yeah, it was where the patriarchy used to be.
No. Simon, go ahead.
Just to assess what you were saying, Mehmet, the conqueror, being the victor, you say, was in a position to write history. The victor always writes history. And so you're saying he got together with the most literate scholars that were left there, and then started to deliberately put this process in place with his with these ideas. Is that effectively it? He's trying to leave his legacy through some of this through some of these writings.
Yes, apparently, but we know that he was. I mean, there is this political side of writing history, and I mean, one of the first things is that after the conquests. And he has another historian who was a Greek priest, actually, Critoulos. And so, you know, he has them, he hires those people to write about history. As you mentioned, yes, this has a political side, so his legacy will be left for the later generations, for his later historiography, but also this is his intellectual side. I mean, we know that when he left for conquering the islands in Aegean Sea, he stopped around Çanakkale and he looked for Troy. That time it was not known where it was located, but they knew where roughly it was, and he looked for Troy. We know that in his library is very important to answer your question. He was an intellectual person who read antiquity, who knew about antiquity, he was someone who wanted to know pretty much anything going on around the world and had come to the occurrence before him. So his book has science books, has Greek books. Apparently he could understand Greek. And one of his favorite books is apparently the life of Alexander the Great. So he was intellectual enough to be curious about history as well. And therefore he used history as a propaganda.
Right, well that's quite, it's almost a bigger thing than the conquest, isn't it? That it's, if you think about it, right, I'm going to do this conquest, I'm going to take this city that's never been taken in, well, it had been 200 years before, but that was by trickery. But then he's going to make sure everybody knows about who he is for however many generations to follow. Yes. That's quite a bit of an ego. And it's interesting also, the links with Alexander and going to visit Troy, because Alexander himself came to, I'm from near Çanakkale in the summer months, and Alexander himself went to Troy and to visit the site of, I don't know whether it's archaeological tourism or whatever you call it, but it's very fascinating that Mehmet would do the same thing as well. I didn't realize he'd gone and done that, so that's something I'm going to have to look up, and quite interested, because by that time Troy was almost, it had stopped being populated. There were a few monks or whatever until about 1200, but I think after then it just became abandoned, I think.
Yes, it was under soil, so
yes.
They didn't know where it was. But apparently, because Mehmet was a Shehzade, the prince, local ruler in Manisa area, where is Turkey's part of Turkey which has most ancient ruins. So Manisa, Izmir, that area, and he spent time there. And we don't know, like there is nothing left, but we can assume that he has been in touch with those ancient ruins. And if he is curious enough, apparently he was, so he knew about those places as well. So his interest for antiquity, ancient times, comes from his childhood, apparently.
Right, interesting. And hence then the interest in legacy. It's quite a big picture, interesting.
Yes, definitely. Thanks for raising this up, actually, because Mehmed II, as his nickname, his title is Conqueror. We generally consider him as just a conqueror, just a successful warrior. But as you have mentioned, his intellectual side is much more than his military successes.
But it was the thing, wasn't it, with the Ottoman sultans, that they'd often have a hobby. So some of them be poets, or they'd be interested in, I don't know, jewelry or some really, really great. Maybe it was just a thing of theirs. His thing was.
Yes, they have some education, and their hobbies are very important for shaping their personality as well. But to me, I mean, I don't know all the sultans in detail, but Mehmed seems like a very unique personality. I mean, he writes poetry as well. He also takes care of garden, like he's also gardener, and he wants to know history. He wants to be a Roman emperor. His goal is that. And he also tries to improve his conventional army, like using gunpowder, which was pretty much new thing in the 18th century. He, designed some guns, etc. He's working on it. I'm not questioning how successful he was, but dealing with such things, pretty much anything he could do, is quite interesting.
Yeah, that's.
Thank you. I think Mina, you had a question. I think. Yes. Good evening to you. Yes, you need to unmute, of course.
Hi. Yeah. Thank you very much. That was really fascinating and somehow not surprising that they tried to find these connections and sort of adopt what was there, the beauty and the splendor, to themselves, because. Does this not, you focused on the particular character of Fatih Sultan Mehmed, but was this not already a fairly broad trend in the early Ottoman Empire, where they basically absorbed all the Byzantine institutions and took the bureaucracy, the laws, and so on. So, I mean, I feel that perhaps this is a broader absorption of what was there in Istanbul.
Definitely, it was. I mean, we can date it back to Osman I. I mean, he didn't see the conquest of Bursa, but according to the chronicles, while they siege Bursa, he points where his tomb is now. They were baptized buildings in Byzantine time. He points there. He says, "Bury me under that silver dome." So they don't mind being buried in a Christian building, a baptized place. They don't say, "Oh, this is infidel thing. Just let's destroy it and give me something else, build for me something else." And this is very interesting detail. After the Battle of Nicopolis, Yıldırım I defeats the Crusaders in a very harsh way, and he asks for ransom for the son of Burgundy Duke. And of course, he asked for gold, money, a lot of things, but he also asks for Alexander some tapestry dealing with Alexander the Great's conquests. This is something very interesting. And, I mean, when I read about this, I also asked, how did he know those tapestries were in the Duke of Burgundy's house or whatever, in his possession? And he says, the son of Burgundy Duke, that this is nothing. Your defeat here is nothing. You will see my horses will eat grass at the backyard of St. Peter in Rome. So they had this Roman ideology, even in earlier time, as you mentioned. This is something much broader. And interestingly, what is the first son of Mehmed II's name? Mehmed II's first son's name is Beyazıt. So this, I think this is Gülür Necipoğlu is saying that. So could there be a connection? I mean, he was inspired by his grandfather, who also sieged Constantinopolis twice, I guess, who defeated the Crusaders in Nicopolis, and who wanted to reach till Rome. So can we make a connection? So he named his first son after his grandfather. And we cannot just conclude that Mehmed just came out from the closet by saying, I want to be a Roman emperor. Definitely this must have some history, some environment in his father's time, in his grandfather's time, and in his like people around his environment. So definitely this is something much further. And in fact, when they conquer some areas, local Byzantine lords, nobles, they become Muslim and they get positions in Ottoman lands, and actually they work for Ottomans. So the pashas who were in favor of siege of Constantinople were actually the convert ones, not the Muslim Turk origins.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Any more questions, people?
Sorry, can I just come back on that? So, because that's quite interesting. I'd wondered, when there was this adoption that our colleague's just been referring to, but if you think about the marriage, the Ottoman sultans were always they intermarried with the previous. Well, they didn't marry local Turkish women. They married the people from who were the previous rulers, or people who've been brought in. But is there some? Is that part of that grander scheme, or was that just became a fashion after a while? And but could it have started with say Mehmed? I think Mehmed was the last Turkish. Was he the last Turkish sultan? And
after with Süleyman, they began marrying with concubines also, but before, until him, they were marrying with some princesses, as you mentioned. And yes, this should be for making some legitimacy, some legacy as well, because they make connections, and this might work actually. I mean, Uzun Hasan of Akkoyunlus, sorry, Shah Ismail of Iran, Safavids, was also, he could claim the throne of Rum Empire of Trabzon, and he was also coming from Akkoyunlu, Uzun Hasan. And such things work like that, so they can claim some land, some legitimacy over the others. And also, I think it also makes them, like, rather than being enemies, let's be family. But yes, after some point, it doesn't work anymore. I don't really know, but maybe because, like, at the 16th century, they're at the top. So they don't need to do this kind of marriage anymore. So maybe they just go for someone who was trained in the court, who knows the tradition, who knows how to behave, etc. Could that be the reason? I don't know actually, but yeah, this is something very interesting.
Okay, no, but marriage was one of the great weapons. I mean, the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Once, I've forgotten the name, there was a particularly famous empress, and she managed to marry off all of her children very well. And
Marie Therese.
Was it Marie Therese? Yes, yeah. she was brilliant.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and one of the daughters was Marie Antoinette.
Marie Antoinette, yeah. So, but that was a great policy, and they were marrying her. And Queen Victoria had people married off all over the place. And I mean, it's whole of royalty of Europe. And all of the, if you think about any good wedding or funeral, it's a great place for a scrap and a fight or whatever, and people to have all sorts of issues. And so the thought that all of the European royal families are in some way related to each other is a great explanation as to why we've had 1,000 years of war in Europe. So maybe the Ottomans, by steering clear of that, had an idea. So eventually, when they got around to steering clear of it. So.
Also, yes, this is one aspect, but also it helps ruling over the locals. like Ottomans do, okay, it's not marriage, but for instance, when they conquer a land, a Christian land, they keep the local lord. But of course, in Ottoman system, there was no lordship, but they keep him and they change the system a bit. Like, okay, you were independent, but now I will come and I will check you. But they keep the dynasty there as local base, let me say, kind of local lords. I think we would translate into English as lord, but it is definitely not lordship as in English history or in Europe. And marriage also has this kind of effect. I mean, if the Sultan marries with Serbian princess, and when he conquers, after he conquers the Serbian lands, what would be the reaction from the Serbians? I mean, you know, he's husband of our princess in a way also.
Yeah.
So he's not enemy anymore. The ruler is not enemy.
Yeah. So, and then we get back to Alexander and his example in Persia. So this is, I suppose, interesting. I'm not really given that much thought. I perhaps have to go back and dig around, see what there is to it. So.
A question from me. How did the priesthood in Istanbul survive the siege? I mean, presumably most of the priesthood was killed in the sack of the city. So were they invited back, or did they come out from the hiding? I mean, because you said Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror brought these people in to intellectually discuss and formulate the narrative, and also, of course, to re-establish the patriarchy under his own control, which still survives till today, in a way. So I'm just wondering how he managed to bring them out from the woodwork, you could say.
Okay, as the city was conquered but not surrendered, as I have mentioned, it could be sacked, and that includes making slaves as well. So people were enslaved, and actually, where did I read this? I don't remember where I read it. Mehmed asked for the patriarch, like why he is not here, why he didn't come to congratulate me because I conquered the city. They say there is no patriarch anymore because the last emperor, dismissed him and we didn't elect another one, etc. And he says, okay, who do you want to elect? Do whatever the tradition requires, do it. And they say, we want to elect Gennadios. Okay, where is he? He is on the way to Edirne because he is enslaved. So a janissary keeps him and taking it to his place as his slave. And he asks Gennadios, so far I remember from what I read, to be back to Istanbul, and they make elections, the other priests, the ones remaining in the city, and they elect him. So I don't know about in general about the priests, but this is how Gennadios was elected as the patriarch. So it wouldn't be wrong probably to say that Mehmed was the protector of the Orthodox Church, or preserver who preserved it, and therefore the Byzantine law as well. So as you mentioned, it comes till today with the same tradition. Yes. However, for instance, we know that sometimes he was gathering priests and Muslim scholars, and he was making them have a discussion about religion, theology. This is something very, I think this is an amazing thing. I mean, today we don't see such things. So he was, that's very interesting, isn't it? So some Orthodox priests with Muslim scholars, or between Muslim scholars, he was listening them, what they think, how they interpret some theological questions, issues. But I can...
more than keeping the Christian population there. Obviously, he wanted the city still to function and to prosper in the future. So keeping the Christians, the remaining Christians there, you have to do that by having a patriarchy to kind of control the flock, you could say. But it was more than that, obviously, because he was quite sympathetic to Christianity, you could say, very tolerant. And you could say way ahead of his time. Is, as I said, it's quite remarkable by today's standards as well.
Yes, and as I have just shared, this is a plaque in a mosaic in the Patriarchy today. And here is Ignatius. Mehmed is giving him a berat, like a document confirming, guaranteeing him some privilege, and he's given this to him, and this is in the Patriarchy. I haven't seen it by my eyes, but I asked my friend who has been. So apparently this is in the Patriarch Bartholomeo's room, as he said to me. So yes, keeping it, and also, as you said, he wants to be the Roman emperor. In his idea, he's the Muslim Roman emperor, but he doesn't deny the reality of the Orthodox Roman heritage. And apparently, maybe in Turkish, the church, the patriarchy is called Rum Ortodoks Kilisesi. When we translate this into English, we have to make it like Greek Orthodox, but actually it's not the same thing. Greek and Rum are not the same thing. So Rum means Roman, and by using it like that, do we mean that they are the Orthodox Rums and we are the Muslim Rums? Is this the meaning of it? Yeah.
Sure. And of course, for the Jews as well, he welcomed the Jews in.
He actually forced them to come to his city.
Oh, okay, forced them. Okay.
So the Romaiot Jews, the ones from Thessaloniki, today in Greece, they do not like him so much because he, because Constantinopolis was not really, as I mentioned, I mean, it was not that much desirable city anymore. And it is always hard for people to move. I mean, you know, you leave your business, you leave your family, or even they come, you have to start a new life, which is not easy thing. And so those Romaiot Jews who were speaking Greek, they are Byzantine Jews. He actually forced them to come and increase the trade in the new capital, in his capital.
But I thought that the story I always knew is that he didn't, wasn't it? I thought it was Mehmet, but it may have been another one. Sent a whole load of ships to rescue the Ashkenazis from Spain, and they brought shiploads of Jews from Spain to, as Craig said, to welcome them and set up a trading populace in the capital.
It's his son, Beyazıt II, 1492. Ottomans did not have anything like against Jews. Like his policy, like forcing Jews from Thessaloniki to Constantinople, is not because they are Jews. It's like because they do trade and know commercial things. So he just cares about this, and he is the one who founded Hahambaşılık, Jewish patriarchy. Let me say. If it would be appropriate, but it doesn't work because like after the conquest, he moves the Armenian patriarchy from Bursa to Constantinople, to his new capital. He keeps and he gives privilege to Greek patriarchy. They are even sometimes shocked. I think it's Molly Green's book, Ottomans and Greeks, I guess. He gives more privilege to the patriarchy than they used to have under Byzantine rule. Mm-hmm. So in the 15th and 16th century, actually, Ottoman sultans are quite in favor among Greek population. And Jews came, and he also established Jewish patriarchy, let me say, Hahambaşılık, but it just doesn't go further until the 19th century. Because, as you mentioned, Sephardic Jews from Iberia, Spain and Portugal came, and they actually, how can I say, exceeded the number of local Jews, which we call Romaio Jews. So suddenly, foreigner Jews became the dominant ones, and they didn't want to gather in one, let me call again, patriarchy, because their traditions, even though they were sharing the same belief, their traditions were different. Jews are interesting community in Ottoman Empire. Like they could go to their own rabbis for their cases, but in many cases in Thessaloniki, in Istanbul, they go to the Sharia courts sometimes. I don't know, this is more practical, but you know, it's quite common among Jews compared to the other non-Muslim communities.
I'm interested in empires and generally, but this importing of a Jewish class of people who were skilled in trade or other things like I don't know what it particularly was, but there was a particular reason to bring them in, and the preference of other foreign classes. One of the things you hear many times is that although the Ottomans conquered and took over, the Turkish people were the most subjugated people under the Ottoman Empire, and I look back at the British Empire, and the normal English citizens were the people at the very bottom of the. Obviously, there are lots of other people at the bottom of the pile as well. In every other country we ruled, but a lot of normal people in England didn't really benefit particularly much from the empire. They were just people at the bottom of the pile as well. And I was just wondering about that. It was almost taking for granted the Turkish people didn't get any privileges or preferences with rights to trade or monopolies or whatever else. That's a much wider question than the start of the Hagia Sophia, but it is an interesting way these things develop with having minorities ruling.
So this is a very good and necessary question, but it is also a bit complicated because firstly, we are talking about different economic systems. I mean, today we are living in like industrialized economies, but that time Ottoman economy was based on agriculture, and Muslim Turks were doing agriculture. I mean, probably there were Greek villagers, Armenian villagers as well. Interestingly, Jews, they didn't live in villages. They always settled in cities, so their trade, but also what they knew, and they had the connections. I mean, and Ottomans used that actually. They knew language because they came from somewhere else. They knew the language of the country they left, like Spanish, Ladino. And they had relatives all around the Mediterranean. A Jewish family from Aleppo had a cousin in Izmir, Smyrna, and he had an uncle in Livorno who had an aunt in Amsterdam. So this was helping for their trade. And Ottomans and Habsburgs, for instance, they were rivals. They didn't have official trade ship, but they were using Jews as the mediators. And for the Turks, some scholars think that this is a way of protection for the dynasty, because Turkish origins could claim legitimacy on the throne, but an Armenian origin, non-origin, you know, it's obvious that he couldn't. So he couldn't bear the kinship. So could that be related to that? That's an opinion. But also Ottoman society is divided into religion and economic activities. Even today in Turkey, this is something still a bit going on. Like people from like Assyrians from Mardin region, or like some Armenians are doing jewelry thing as a kind of their family business. So this is probably something coming from Ottoman time. And who were the Turks? We need to ask as well. I mean, of course, surely Ottomans were Turks, but they were also an empire. And being an empire is different. And they didn't have this today's modern Turkishness idea, like being Armenian idea. If a Greek, Orthodox Greek converts to Islam, here he became a Turk now. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know it's
interesting.
Yeah.
Any more questions from anybody?
Hi, I've got a question. It's Mustafa Kidwai. You mentioned Mehmed having a library. Are there records of any libraries attached to the church at the time of the conquest? And did any of the materials, the books, the manuscripts survive? Are they still, can they be seen in Istanbul?
A very, very good question. Thank you very much for raising this up. Yes, as I have mentioned, Mehmed had interest for books and he tried to do his best. But some of them were sacked, plundered, and some chronicles say that they were sold for very cheap prices. So they are just gone. However, we know that Mehmed kept some books and he created a great library in the palace, Topkapı Palace. Julian Raby has a PhD thesis on that, which is not online available. It's in Oxford Bodleian Libraries. And apparently his son, Bayezid II, distributed the second's books. Some of them were from Byzantine heritage, inherited from the Byzantine libraries, Byzantine courts, and also some from the church probably. We know we have some part of the list, so we can understand what kind of library we are dealing with. But many of them are found in different libraries in Istanbul. Some of them still exist, but they are given away to Süleymaniye Library or given away to Hagia Sophia Library, given away to some dergah, some religious lodge. And apparently this is something Bayezid II did, because we know he also sold his portraits away. I mean, there is no official record, but yeah, like the one in it's the National Gallery, right? Mehmed II's famous portrait by Bellini. It was sold out. Bayezid just didn't things, including those books.
Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh God.
Was there a religious reason why these artworks were sold out, you could say?
Religious?
Well, in terms of the depiction, human depiction in Islam not being, shall we say, kosher, did Bayezid II sold these books and artwork because of religious reasons, or was it just purely financial, you think?
It is hard to answer this, because even we can trace some of the books as they are given away to some other libraries in Istanbul, but surely there are some others we cannot trace. So, and are they the ones who left to abroad, who were given away, who were sold to abroad? So it is very hard which book was that. But Mehmet, okay, so your question could be that as well, Bayezid II, but we can also say that Bayezid II and his father, they don't get along well. They don't have the same policies, same approach, same ideologies. So religious reason could be one of it. But anyway, if Bayezid II, so let's ask this question. The environment Mehmed II raised was, to what extent it was different than the environment Mehmed II raised up. Yeah.
I mean, the interesting thing is, one of the first pictures you showed had the portrait of Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror, and it had on the side 3 crowns that looked like Christian king type crowns, which is, you know, oh, I think you're going to show that image, aren't you? Okay.
Yeah, do you see it now?
But it didn't quite work, but yeah. So it's almost like it's almost like the Christian symbol. So he clearly, that portrait, he wanted to show himself, but not 1, but 3. Do you think?
Well, 6.
Oh, of course, yeah. The 2 sides become 6. Yeah. Okay. So do you think there's something special about the number of the crowns on that portrait?
Mehmed is the 7th Sultan. So 6 on the sides, and he is the 7th on the middle.
Right. Simple as that.
Right.
But I assume. However, let me show you something more interesting.
Okay.
Here, this is a medallion made by, I think, Filarete, the architect I mentioned. I am not sure who made this. And this is, you see, Paleologos. This is the Byzantine emperor, ruler. Here, this is Mehmed.
Wow.
Or even, he patrons these ones. And apparently who made this work, I don't remember. But one scholar counted up to 19 medallions Mehmed patronized, and this makes him the ruler at his time with the highest number of medallions. So he patronized them. And let me also show you this, how he was depicted. He pretty much pays, oh yes. So I will just copy it. Yes, this one. You don't see it, right?
No,
now share it. Is it on the screen?
It's oh yes, yeah, good. That's good.
So this is Mehmed II. And pay attention. Oh, sorry, what happened? Okay. He is depicted in almost pretty much the same way. Byzantine Emperor John VIII. John VIII, the Paleologos, is depicted, and his title here, as you can read here, El Gran Turco. Wow. This is an Italian painting, I guess. So they don't even, I mean, okay, he claimed being a Roman emperor, and to some extent, to a large extent, he was regarded as a Roman emperor in Renaissance Italy. I mean, they call him as Il Despot, which means the one who holds power and knowledge, and they were calling Byzantine emperors as Il Despot as well. Oh. Yes, some Italian travelers or chronicles say that there was Greek-speaking Il Despot. Now we are dealing with Turkish-speaking Il Despot.
So the meaning of despot today is quite...
Yes, yes. Yes, but it's a medieval Greek word, which means the one holding power and knowledge. Knowledge is a key word, I think, here.
Okay. Wow, that's really interesting. So what we've got then is there was a fabulous library, like forever in history, and some beautiful paintings. And because Bayezid didn't have a very good relationship with Mehmet, who was a great scholar and interesting guy and all-around genius, but perhaps not the best dad. So Bayezid goes off, flogs all of his paintings and gives away his library just to insult his father, and so he can clear out some space for his golf clubs or whatever it was he was doing. That's a pretty sad.
Yes, and this is why there is this claim that he actually poisoned. I mean, his men.
Oh, right, and not the Pope.
We don't know. We don't know because, but there are, some ideas, of course, because probably he was going to Rome. We don't know that as well, because he died around Gebze, which was the place the Ottoman fleet would leave for battles, but it was also policy not to say where they were going to, so we don't know where he was going. But at that time, Ottoman army was holding the Otranto, the corner of Italy at that time. And when he dies, Bayezid II immediately calls Gedik Ahmet Pasha, who conquered Otranto, and he's just executed.
Oh, crikey. Interesting.
Execution is interesting. As I mentioned, Mehmed also executed his architect.
What comes around goes around, eh? Oh, well. So.
A question on, again, it's slightly off topic, but there's a misconception perhaps that with the conquest of Constantinople, many wise men went to Rome and helped the flourishing Renaissance by bringing the old translated works from the Arab world. Is this true? I mean, or is this like a legend, you think?
I don't think to Rome, because Orthodox Christians are certain about their relations with Catholics. And Rome as the center of Catholic Church, not Rome, but Florence, which also flourished the Renaissance arts. So Florence, probably it was not at least center of Catholic Church. And I actually also never heard about Rome, but Florence, yes, we know some people left and they carried some books as well. And for instance, Carrier Mosque, just converted to a mosque again recently, it has this ribbed dome, which shows some Renaissance influence, but it is before Renaissance. So some art historians suggest that Renaissance actually started a bit in Constantinople, then it moved to Florence. And therefore we have Da Vinci, Michelangelo, and all those Renaissance painters and artists. So yes, to some extent, yes, it did happen.
On the translations and the migration of those into the Renaissance, I've heard those stories about the wagon loads of books being taken out of Constantinople and prior to the siege and during it and whatever. But there was also the border with Spain and everything that was going on there, and there was fantastic works going on in Spain with the three the Christians, the Jews, and the Muslims, quite openly mixing in many of the places, and that was also thought to be one of the things that inspired the Renaissance. And there would be it wouldn't have been the originals, but there'd been access to a lot of copies of those Arab translations that would have gone up through Spain. It's a much easier route to get in You think about in time of war with books trying to flee out of Constantinople, there'd be a lot more could just gradually merge up through Spain. But I don't know. It's maybe it was both, and it's just the fact that some of those books survived, and we had the benefit of some of them. But they made it one way or another. They made it.
This kind of big event, not event, but like process, do not come with one point, one origin, of course. So yes, the translations from Spain also had an influence, and indeed 10th, 11th, 9th century Arabic translations from the antiquity was very glorious, and it has carried the late antiquity into the medieval age. This is something we can surely say. There is a book. How is it called? Thinking in Greek, doing in Arabic, something like that. I can find, and if you are interested, I can send it to you. It is a great book, apparently, for assessing this translation process and its effects on the Renaissance.
Oh, I'd be interested if you send us a link for that. That would be an interesting one to look at. But again, you're looking at these things, and those Arab translations were the Great Library. Was it the Golden Library or whatever? I can't remember. It's on the in Baghdad. There's a fabulous library lost to the Mongol hordes, and just. It's the thought that all we've got left are the one or two bits of whatever that was there that people could run away with, probably their favorite book. So just think about it, that they're coming. What are you going to grab? Your favorite book. And they ran off, and all we've got left are whatever people could manage to, their most precious items are what we've got left to stop.
Yes.
And move on with.
Some scholars, there is this thought as well. They originate the decline in Islamic thought, Islamic civilization into that sect in Baghdad, the Library of Baghdad, because apparently it was, as you mentioned, enormous, and losing it. Of course, you do not just lose the books, but you lose people who had access to it, who could assess them, who have read them, who have, worked on them. So you lose all of them. And this, according to some scholars, this has started the decline in Islamic civilization.
Yeah, well, it's almost akin to the Bronze Age collapse, isn't it? Sorry, we're going through history now, but after whatever happened, but after about 1100 BC, there was a dreadful, for a culture like the Greeks to have lost the ability to write over 500 years. I mean, it's a shocking thing, and so that hit that they took, and the thought that it was, and with the Great Library of Alexandria as well. Some of these things are just terrible hits, and with Caesar hitting our Druids, who were a living repository of all of our learning in this country, and you think of it, and then the Vikings coming and taking some of the great monasteries and ripping the books to pieces for the jewel covers, and all of these hits that we've had on our learning and our culture. Just gone, and think of so many times that our development has been hiccuped is frightening, really. So the thought that we even had a Renaissance is just, you've got to think.
I have found the book Greek Thought, Arabic Culture. I remembered how it was named, and it's by Dimitri Gutas. I just texted on the chat.
Great.
So for the ones who are interested in, and for the Library of Mehmed II, Yes, I would suggest Julian Raby, but as I have mentioned, it's hard to access. I think some fireworks are going around my area. Sorry about that.
It's all right. We've got the same thing going here.
I don't know, it's not Halloween.
Yeah.
Yes, Julian Raby is the scholar who worked on Mehmed II's library. And I think recently another publication was made by Harvard University scholars, Cemal Kafadar, Gülru Necipoğlu, about they reassessed Mehmed II's library with some new findings, but I haven't checked it, so I can't really say anything about it. And yes, is there anything else you would like me to emphasize or talk more about? How Ottomans dealt with their Byzantine heritage?
I think probably we've had a discussion for an hour and people will be wanting to get to their firework displays.
Yeah, I've got my dinner to get to.
But it's been absolutely fascinating, Doğukan. Thank you. And thank you also for being the kind, as it were, the pioneer in launching the Anglo-Turkish Society into the modern world. I mean, what can we say? We feel extremely up to date now. And thank you, Craig, for setting everything up. Craig, when's the next one?
Well, if you go to the website, it's already there.
Find out.
So it is on the 15th of December, again 6 p.m.
Right.
Council, the Lily and the Crescent, Louis XIV and the Ottomans, Culture, Commerce, and the Crusades. So it's sort of at a similar sort of theme, really.
Very similar. So we'll carry on our splendid discussion there, from which I'm sure we've all learned a very great deal. And all we can do now is say thank you to our speaker, and we're sorry we're not in the same room as you to as it were, have a glass of wine with you as we normally would, but can't be helped. And indeed. And we'll just say, well, have a very good evening, and thank you very much indeed.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks, everybody. I put the book on from it's Amazon. It's about £28 or £101 on hardback.
Well.
There we are. You've got to get the hardback.
Thank you so much. Nice to see everybody. See you again next time.
See you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.